Spidcast.
The future of collaborative video production.
Spidcast.
News, information, conversation, collaboration.
Spidcast.
Hi, I'm Michael London, and welcome to Spidcast, the future of collaborative video production, brought to you by Spidvid.com. On this episode, we're visiting with John Gray and Melissa Jo Peltier. You've recently seen John's work as a producer on the TV series Ghost Whisperer and in TV movies such as Helter Skelter, Martin & Lewis, and a lot more. Melissa's credits include executive producer with The Dog Whisperer and co-executive producer on My Big Fat Greek Wedding. They collaborated together on John's semi-autobiographical film White Irish Drinkers. I'm certain you'll enjoy their similar but quite unique stories as well. First up is John Gray. John, welcome to Spidcast.
Well, thanks for having me.
Tell us a bit about your story.
Well, I was, very, very lucky to know at a young age that this is what I wanted to do. I used to think I wanted to be an actor when I was a very young kid because I thought the actors kind of did it all. And then it started to dawn on me as I made films with my uncle's Super 8 camera and got more involved in what it takes to actually put a little movie together and tell a story. I realized that there was another sort of presence, another brain that was behind the camera that was putting all this stuff together. And I gave up the idea of being an actor, which I think is good news for the world. And really got committed to writing and directing, and they both seem to be one thing to me. And I was very young when I made that commitment, and I was also very lucky in that I because I was so young and because I grew up in Brooklyn and knew no one in the film business or television business, and, no connections whatsoever, I had no idea how hard it was. I really just had no idea how impossible trying to break into this business was. So I just kind of went on my way, just thinking this is what I'm going to do with my life, and I'm going to make it happen. And, it took about, 12 years, I guess, before I could actually start making a living at it. But I, just was really persistent, and I was always trying to make movies on my own, always trying to do low-budget stuff and writing all the time. And ultimately I got an opportunity to direct some educational films in Washington, D.C. They were dramatic films, but they were for classroom use, and that was a great experience. And then, to make a very long story short, there's a script I had written that got me signed by an agent out in L.A., and that sort of started my career in earnest. I was then able to really make a living just writing and ultimately directing, and I got started in television with my first film was actually a feature, an independent feature, and then I started doing TV movies, which I really enjoy because I was able to do really, I felt, really interesting stories and really had some great material to work with, and that's sort of the really telescoped Reader's Digest version of how I got started.
John, you touched on something just a moment ago. If you had known just how difficult this business can be, would you have taken the same career path?
That's a great question, and that's a really great question, and that's something that I often. It's one of the reasons why I think I'm so lucky that I didn't know, because maybe if someone sat me down and said, "Okay, you're 18, you're going to be to 30 by the time you can actually make a living doing this," I don't know. Maybe I would have thought, "Well, I don't want to do that." I don't know. I like to think that I was committed enough to not care, but in my mind, I was going to be success tomorrow. I'm going to get this next thing done tomorrow. That's how the attitude I had all the way through. So I never sat down and went, "Wow, it's taking a really long time. Should I give up?" I just thought it just made me more determined. The more obstacles I found, the more determined I got to do it. And then at a certain point, you get a little bit desperate too, because you realize that I didn't think I was suited for anything else in life, really, than to be a filmmaker. That was really what I felt I was here to do. So that's a good question. I think I'm glad I didn't have to answer it, for real.
And tell us a bit about how creating content for television differs from content for the film world.
Well, I think the big difference is that for TV, of course, for broadcast television, you're trying to get that big, wide audience. But at the same time, at least in terms of movies, not so much series, but in terms of movies, the subject matter you can tackle is so much more interesting than what you can usually do in the feature world. I made movies about, the first Civil War submarine. I did a movie about the partnership between Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. I did a movie about Lincoln's assassination. I was able to indulge a lot of my own personal fascinations by making movies about them for television, which, in the feature world, you'd probably never get those movies made unless you had some megastar attached to them. But that's why I always love working in television movies, particularly I did a lot of movies for TNT and for CBS, and at that time, there are not very many made now, but at that time, it was easier to get to do something a little bit different and really kind of interesting. And I was able to do, each movie I did was vastly different from the other. In the feature world, I found it difficult to try to anticipate what's commercial, what isn't. As a writer, I'm more attracted to, sort of character-driven material, and that's very difficult to do in the feature world. And I've made a few features, and I hope to make more features, but mostly I've tried to stay in that indie sort of sensibility where you're just sort of making what they would consider perhaps small movies, but to me are very big movies about relationships and people and humanity and how we all deal with each other.
Hey, John, I'd like to hear about your most recent film, White Irish Drinkers. Take us through that.
It was a script I had written about 10 years ago that I really, really wanted to make. And, it was a character piece. It was a very gritty, kind of violent look at growing up in Brooklyn. And you could never get money raised to actually get it financed as a feature. And so for those 10 years, I just kept revisiting it and trying to figure out how can I get this made. And a lot of people read the script in the business and liked the script. And in fact, it got me a lot of work, the writing work. But no one really wanted to make it. Everyone just felt like, it's characters, it's small. And, So what happened during those 10 years then, really three things, I guess. One is that the technology changed so drastically in those 10 years. And then also, I was lucky enough to get a successful television series on CBS that lasted for 5 years. So I had some more financial resources than I'd ever had before. The other thing was that, I married Melissa, who was a really brilliant producer, and she kind of convinced me to not give up on this movie, and so we sort of teamed up. And I realized that I could probably spend about $600,000 and make this movie digitally. And called in a lot of favors from the people I've worked with for the past 20 years, and that's really how that came about. We shot it, for that $600,000. We shot it in 17 days, all in Brooklyn, and we got a wonderful cast: Stephen Lang and Karen Allen and Peter Wiegert, and then some really exciting young actors: Nick Thurston and Jeff Wigdor and Leslie Murphy. People I think are going to be huge in years to come. And it was just a wonderful experience. It was great making a movie just as we wanted to make it. There was no studio, there was no network, it was just us. And the movie was released. We got a small release. We were out in about 25 cities. But that in itself is a miracle these days with the climate that the independent film's in. And it's on DVD now and Blu-ray and Netflix and iTunes, and it'll be on Showtime in the fall. So it was a great experience. I mean, we got the movie out there, and it was something I'm dying to do again.
And we do hope that you get that opportunity again. And as you said, Ghost Whisperer allowed you the financing to make that film. Take us through a little bit of the story of Ghost Whisperer.
It was really interesting because I had never done a series before. In fact, I had never even pursued a series. This opportunity just came to me because an executive I work with at CBS had wanted me to meet this woman who the Ghost Whisperer was based on. And when I met this woman, I realized there was a way to maybe really do a series that for me would be really interesting, which was to meld horror with emotional, character-driven stories. And so that's kind of how I pitched it. And probably most people who get involved with series, you just never believe they're going to go. And I wrote the pilot, and I figured out that'll be the end of that. And then they said, well, let's shoot it. Go ahead and shoot it. And I thought, well, okay, I've never directed a pilot. I'll see what that's like, and I'm sure that's as far as it'll go. And we made the pilot, and then they said, okay, why don't you do 13 of them? And I was like, oh, no. I have to do this 13 more times. I don't know if I could do it. And then ultimately they gave us a full season pickup, and then ultimately we went on to do 5 years. And it was really interesting. I loved a lot of it. I wrote many, many episodes, directed many, many episodes, and that was really fun because it was so fast. You get an idea for a show, and then 2 months later it's on the air. So in that respect, it was very heady, and we loved the cast, and the crew was really like family to me, and that part was really great. The part that I enjoyed less was the kind of the showrunner aspect of it for those first 2 seasons, where I was really kind of dealing with more administrative things and creative things. Well, of course, running the writing, I guess was the biggest creative job, but it was dealing with the network and dealing with the studio and dealing with agents and dealing with physical production and things that a producer does and things that I never aspired to do. I just consider myself a writer, director, and that's really what I want to do. So in that 3rd season, we brought in P.K. Simmons to be the real showrunner, so that I could sort of step back and pursue other things, but also keep writing and directing for the series. And that was a wonderful change for me, and that's what ultimately allowed me to write some other pilots and also to get White Irish Drinkers off the ground.
So you have gotten one of your dream projects off the ground. You've had it made. You've had it distributed. But, John, if you were a 20-something just trying to break into the business, what is the career path you would take? What advice do you have for the young filmmaker looking to get in?
Well, I think the real advantage that young people starting out today have is, again, the digital possibilities of cinema. When I wanted to make a movie, I had to do it either in Super 8 when I was a kid or 16 millimeter, it's a huge expense. But I mean, now you see people making movies on their iPhones, and to me that's really exciting, and that's what I would advise, and I always advise everyone to do, is get out there and make movies. Learn how to tell stories to the camera, learn how to work with actors, and that's something I always emphasize, because I feel like what's happening with young people, young filmmakers today, is that they're so involved with the technical aspects of it, which are really fascinating and limitless. But I think what we're losing a little bit is people being interested in storytelling and in creating performances with an actor and collaborating with an actor. And a lot of times you'll see a director on a set these days, and they just hide behind the monitor and they never talk to the actors. And that's an art I think we're losing. And so that's something I always encourage young filmmakers to learn. I encourage them to read, not just scripts, but read the great novels, learn storytelling in the best possible way, see every movie you possibly can, and take acting classes. Learn what it's like to be an actor. Learn, it doesn't matter if you suck as an actor, but you have to learn what it's like, what actors go through, and be a friend to the actor. Don't be afraid of actors. And that's, to me, those are the best things to do. And it's a scary atmosphere today, as it always is, because the business has contracted, and there are fewer movies being made, and there isn't any longer that incredible reservoir of television movies where you can go and cut your teeth and learn on. But now I think it just behooves any young filmmaker to go out there, make your movie, make it as great as you can, learn from it, make another one, get it out on the internet, get it on YouTube, get it seen, and just keep working that way, and just never rest. Just keep going.
Excellent advice, John, for the young filmmaker. Now, as you said, you've seen in your lifetime the whole process of filmmaking change completely. Let's go forward, maybe to the year 2021, 10 years from now. What do you see? What will filmmaking look like then?
It's always hard to. I mean, it's hard to guess, because who knows what the next development is around the corner. But based on what I see now, I think everyone will be experiencing movies through their computers, or certainly through the ether. I think the idea of DVDs, unfortunately, all those, the hardware is probably going to go away, and I think that movies are going to get easier and easier to make, and easier to see. And I don't know if that's going to devalue them or if that's going to make them more valuable. I'm not really sure how that's all going to shake out. I think that what we're probably going to look at in the future, I believe, is that probably the only movies, big studio movies that will get made in the future are big tentpole, Planet of the Apes and gigantic event movies. And I think the smaller movies, like today, like The Help and movies like that, I think we're probably going to see more on demand or in delivery systems other than theaters, because I just believe that it's not going to be cost effective in the future to make those movies, market them, in theaters. I hope I'm wrong. I really do, but that's kind of where I see it going.
Now, there you make an excellent point, the accessibility, the ease of use, the quality of the equipment, but, right, it still comes down to the writing. Am I right on that?
I think it does. I mean, I think at the end of the day, the things that last, the things that live on in people's memories, the Godfathers, the classic films, the Tennessee Williams movies, those all, it's all about the characters, the writing, and the storytelling. And, the other stuff is great too. I mean, and I love. I mean, I'm the first guy online to see the big effects movies. They'll just go away. They won't live on in the history of film the way a movie that really look at the movie Rocky. Couldn't be a simpler film done for I don't know how much money, $1 million maybe back in those days. Yet people still reference Rocky. They still talk about it. They still and it was just a movie about people. And I think those are the kind of movies that live on, and I would hope that there are more people out there who want to make those kinds of movies, even though in the future they may not be as widely distributed as the bigger effects movies. But we need those movies, and I think they're starting to be eradicated a little bit by these big effects extravaganzas, which I'm not down on those. I love them. I'm always there for them, but you just don't want that to be all there is.
I am in agreement with you there, John. So tell us, what is next from John Gray?
Well, I'm actually, right now, I'm in New Orleans. I'm directing a movie for TNT called Hide, which is a terrific thriller, which I did not write. Janet Brownell wrote it, based on a novel. And I'm also, Melissa and I and my other producing partners have another lower-budgeted thriller called Slander, which is about hate speech, that we're trying to raise money for right now, trying to get some casting attached. It's another, movie we're hoping to make independently as a feature. And I've written another TNT movie, and basically just trying to stay busy and keep it all going.
Thank you, John Gray, for joining us today on Spidcast.
Spidcast.
Next up is writer, producer, director Melissa Jo Peltier. Melissa continues to produce The Dog Whisperer and co-executive produced My Big Fat Greek Wedding. And as you just heard, she is a frequent professional collaborator with our previous guest and is also married to John Gray. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Tell us about your story. How did you break into filmmaking?
Well, my beginning in filmmaking was due to my father, who is now 90 and literally just retired from teaching. He was teaching at Harvard Institute for Learning and Retirement, and he was at the time an audiovisual librarian, but a frustrated filmmaker, and he actually taught me how to edit film when I was 9. So I made my first movies when I was 9 years old, 8 years old. I was doing plays when I was 4. He was basically taught me film theory before I knew what film theory was. And that was just, I was bitten by the bug that young, and I was just always a natural storyteller. So the way I got into the business really was I went to Pomona College in Claremont, California, which is a really wonderful school, and I was a English major there, but I was also in theater there. And while I was a senior there, I got an internship on a documentary, and that sort of sent me down the documentary path, even though my goal had always been to do drama. I got very addicted to doing documentaries. I got sort of caught up in the excitement of being a fly on the wall and being in people's real lives and doing what I thought was making a difference, because I always had a little bit of that social justice side of me. So that was my beginning, and because our business is so varied and there's no direct, 1, 2, 3 path you can take to do anything in it, I definitely veered from that over the years, but that was definitely my start.
So you say that you learned to edit from your dad. Do you mean you were actually cutting film stock or digitally?
No, that was a long time ago. There was no digital then. I was editing Super 8 film on little teeny moviolas, with glue, cutting it with glue. I had small fingers, so it actually made it even easier because I was only 9.
What a great experience.
It really was. I think one of the things that I learned early also from my dad, but also my mother was a third-generation English major, and there was a lot of reading in my family, a lot of reading and a lot of classic films and theater, and I think just the building blocks of storytelling. One of the things that excited me about documentaries was I had never thought about how the building blocks of fictional storytelling can be used in telling real-life stories, and that was something that just thrilled me and took me off in that direction. And those are things I learned young, too.
Well, fiction or nonfiction, you're still telling a story, so it always comes back to the writing.
I think so, and one of the questions I know you wanted to ask me was advice to young filmmakers and wannabe filmmakers, and my main advice, I was thinking about this today, is to learn storytelling and to learn it from the Greek tragedies, the real ones, to today, to the most avant-garde methods of storytelling today, and try to see the patterns, because no matter what, you can have the most original voice in the world. You can be the most imaginative person in the world, but you still are part of a tradition, and you will fall somewhere along that line, even if you're pioneering a whole new genre. So I just recently read an article about how there's a lot of people who want to become writers who don't think they should have to read, and they don't think they should have to read classics. And their argument is, well, our voices are fresher that way. But the truth is, you're reinventing the wheel if you're doing that. Also, I don't know why anyone wouldn't want to experience the pleasure of reading and seeing classic films. I mean, that's just, to me, that's one of the natural highs of life. But I think learning the basics of storytelling is one of the most important things that any storyteller can do, whether you're going to be a cameraman and you're just going to shoot. You still want to learn storytelling, story beats, how stories unfold, and how it's been done, and the many, many different ways it's been done over the years. Whether it's a news story or reality TV or it's an opera. It's the same basic principles of storytelling, and everything flows from there. So I can't recommend enough to young filmmakers to really study great things in every possible form, all the way back to the Greek plays.
Excellent advice, Melissa. Now, you recently were involved in a project with a fantastic story, White Irish Drinkers. Tell us about that.
White Irish Drinkers came about because my husband, John Gray, he'd been doing the Ghost Whisperer series, which he created for a number of years, and that went off the air, and he had written a couple pilots for network TV, and he's a really incredible writer. And the pilots got to that point where they were in the running. It was between his pilot and another pilot, and they went with the other pilot, and that happened twice in a row. And it's a good way to make a living. It definitely pays the bills, but he was getting frustrated about not being able to tell his own stories. So he pulled the script out of the drawer, and he said, this is something I wanted to make for years, and is it any good? I don't know. And I read it, and I just said, I think this is the most honest thing you've written, and I think we should make it. And so we actually decided to throw our own money, it was really John's money from the Ghost Whisperer, in and make it and call in whatever favors we could. Nobody worked free on it, but everybody worked pretty damn close. And to really get out there and make it. And for me, it was my first experience. I've actually been involved in independent films before, but it was my first experience really down and dirty on the ground making an independent film. And I had two other producers with me, Paul Bernard and Jim Skura. Jim was more the guy watching the budget. He was not on the set. And Paul was actually doing the first assistant director job on the set also. But really, between the two of us, we were putting out all the fires. And on a film that small, there's a lot of fires. But it taught me, first of all, that all my TV experience, learning how to be down and dirty and fast, actually pays off, because we were able to do a feature film in 17 days and do it well. And I think the other thing that it taught me, well, in terms of filmmaking, was it taught me about the honesty of a filmmaker's voice and And if you can stay connected to that, how it really comes out in every aspect of the film. I believe John was so connected to this film that it was infectious for the actors, the production designer, all of us. And everyone up to the last possible minute was, actors like Karen Allen and Stephen Lang were going out on their own with no money, nothing, just going out promoting this film because they believed in it so much. And I think that's something that I took with me about the strength of your commitment to a project can really be infectious. So, there's times when you do have to just do it for a living and phone it in. But when you're really passionate about something and you get the right people behind you, you can really make miracles.
Passion certainly is what draws many people into this business. What would you tell a young, passionate filmmaker about how to go about breaking into the biz?
It's such a different time than when I started in the business. The technology has changed so much. I think that learning technology, modern technology right now is very important. I think learning the building blocks of storytelling is very important. I think being flexible. I think knowing what you want is important. But there's people out there who don't know exactly what they're going to do in this business and still can find that by working. You don't necessarily have to get an MFA to do that. You can get out there and get on the set and work and be a PA and work your way from the bottom and see what you really connect with. And that's something that was true when I was starting, and it's true now. But you'll have to find something that will make you stand out if that's going to be the way that you want to get in. Knowing your craft better. And once again, some of the basic rules of just being a good employee really apply in the business. There are a lot of people, and I've had this experience because I ran a company for 15 years. There's a lot of people who come out of school, film school, who are very bright and have, been a big fish in a small pond, and they'll start out as somebody's assistant, and then they'll 3 months later will say, when do I get a chance to produce? And it doesn't work like that. You still have to earn your way, just like in any field. So it's important to really work your butt off. Work hard, have a great work ethic, have a great attitude. Don't expect your dreams to come true tomorrow. Keep dreaming them and keep working toward them. But work hard, and people will notice your hard work and your good attitude. There's no question, because it's still, even in our business, it's not that common by people starting out. People will notice it.
So, what is next for Melissa Jo Peltier?
Right now, I'm working on a couple writing projects, book projects, but I'm also working on a film with my husband where we're another independent film that we're trying to raise money for. It's being read by some actors right now, and actors reps rather. Can't name them right now, but we're hoping that we're going to get a pretty important name to play this role. The name of the movie is Slander, and it's a small movie, but it's a really, really powerful story that John's written. And we want to put our whole team together that we had on White Irish Drinkers again, because that was such a great experience for everybody who worked on it. And this time we'd have a little more money and maybe a few more days to shoot. But everyone who worked on the film was like us. We just love the process of filmmaking. So it doesn't matter that we don't have trailers and all the perks that you might have on a network television show, because actually it's more fun to have less money. Once you've actually worked with money, it's sometimes a lot more fun to just do it the way that you did it when you were 9 years old.
Well, certainly things have changed since then, including what we're doing right now. Share with us your thoughts about Spidvid and what impact it has on future filmmakers.
Well, I think what's exciting about it is that, and I like this about Twitter, which is how I found Spidvid, and I like the fact that you can communicate with people who share your goals and also some of your values and your taste, who might be very far away from you. And I think that that's an important aspect of the organization that you have, which is that, people can reach out to others. They may have a vision that nobody near them can connect to that vision. They may just not connect. But somebody 2,000 miles away might absolutely connect and might be the piece of the puzzle that they need to get it finished. So I think that's a really nice thing about today's technology. Everyone was more isolated starting out when I began. I mean, I remember writing letters, literally, sitting down at the typewriter and typing letters to producers, trying to get meetings with them. And it's much more possible now to reach out in other ways. So networking is easier, and I think that if you use it right and in a discerning manner, I think that's a real advantage to new technology.
Well, speaking of networking, how can folks get in touch with you and learn more about you?
Well, I'm on IMDb, so if they want to see everything that I've done, or pretty much everything since IMDb started. I'm on Twitter at Melissa Jo Peltier at Twitter. White Irish Drinkers, themovie.com is the website of our movie. My television production company is called MPH Entertainment. MPHENT.com is our website. We've done a lot of nonfiction TV, including the show The Dog Whisperer, which we still do. That's probably the best way.
Melissa Jo Peltier, thank you so much for taking the time to visit with us today.
Thank you, Michael. I really appreciate talking to you.
Thanks for listening to our Spidcast show. We appreciate your time and attention. You can now join the conversation at spidvid.com or on our Spidvid blog. And you can join our collaborative filmmaking community at spidvid.com. Tune in next month for another entertaining and informative episode of Spidcast.
Spidcast.